In today's video I wanted to go over my Yujin gun buffing build. This build mainly centers around maximizing the firearm attack damage, and it uses several of his skills to strategically increase the output of his damage. And this build is particularly useful in coordinated fights with group play. I've written up another document going over the build that I've made today. It's only a 4-page document. It goes over the information for the skills, the calculations for each buff, the reactor that you want, and the components that you want, and then some extra additional notes. I'll have that linked in the description. With this build, we're using Proliferating Allergy. Now, I do think there's a point where you're having diminishing returns for how much firearm attack damage that you can get, because it requires so much effort to gain all of the firearm attack damage. So you're probably better off having a hybrid build between healing and firearm damage. But this build today is mainly focusing on the max amount of firearm attack damage that you can get. With your first skill, this basically attaches a drone to an ally, and this provides recovery to them. But the main one that we're wanting is the Stimulant buff at the bottom. This gives a 34.5% increase to the firearm attack, and this only lasts for 5 seconds, and you can buff it all the way up to 10 seconds. This buff only activates once the first buff has fully ended. So the buff above, called Sustained Recovery, it has a duration of 20 seconds. You have to wait these full 20 seconds before you can get the Stimulant buff. I was testing this before, and it didn't matter if I ran away from anyone that had the drone on them. If I did run away, I wouldn't gain the Stimulant buff, and neither would they. What I would recommend with this skill is to use the skill at the start of the Intercept battle, so that when the boss spawns in, it'll be closer to ending, and then when it does end, you'll gain the Stimulant buff for the firearm attack increase and the skill power increase. And this is given to you and the person you give the drone to. The only issue with this is that you have to stay next to your teammate so that the drone doesn't disappear, because if the drone does disappear, then you don't get the buff. That's why I recommend having some range mods. But at the same time, if you have a coordinated team, you don't even need range mods if you're standing next to each other. When you use this skill, it will shoot out a laser, and whenever you're near a teammate, you're able to give them the drone just by clicking it. It will then start the duration of Sustained Recovery. Then after the duration, you'll gain Stimulant. For your second skill, Proliferating Allergy, this basically just throws a projectile forward and inflicts the enemies with explosive reaction. And we're mainly focusing on the received damage increase of 10%. The reason we use this red mod is so that we can inflict the Colossi with explosive reaction, because without it, the Colossi has a separate effect which only gives us recovery whenever we're attacking. So instead now we deal 10% extra damage to the Colossi, and this is for firearm attack and skill power attack. And then obviously when the skill ends, you deal a little burst of damage as well. So for an example of this skill, when you use it on an enemy, it gives them these green bubbles, and you'll see the little debuff icon at the top, and you deal the extra 10% damage while this duration is there. Stimulant Spray, we don't really use this skill, but you can use it if you want. This one basically just reduces the damage taken by allies, and it heals them slightly whenever they're hit. But since we're mainly focusing on firearm attack, we don't really use this skill. Then for Hyperreactive Healing Ground, this heals allies within the circle and grants purification. The healing is increased by 50% per ally and 10% per enemy within the range, but this healing percentage is capped at 100%. So if you have 2 allies in your circle, you'll be healing for the maximum amount you can. When you use this skill, you also gain purification and hyperactivity. This basically just makes you immune to debuffs, but the main one we're focusing on is hyperactivity, and this gives us a firearm attack increase and a skill power increase for 20 seconds, and that's 23% and 34.5%. The only issue with hyperactivity is that you can only grant it to yourself, so you can only give yourself the 23%. And to use purification and hyperactivity, you have to use the attack button, so obviously left click on keyboard. When you do this, you will gain the purification and hyperactivity buffs, and these both last for 10 seconds, and you can boost it up to 20 seconds. The good thing about this is whenever you use your fourth skill, you can just use your attack button and you will gain both the buffs instantly. Now for the build, the modules that you're actually wanting are these ones. We use the red mod Proliferating Allergy. This changes the second skill, so you can use the received damage increase of 10% on Colossi, mid-air maneuvering, or any other capacity modules that you want. Then we use 3 duration modules, maximize duration, skill extension, and battle of stamina. This is to make the duration of every single buff last longer, so that we can have the firearm attack increase for a longer duration. We then use skill cooldown, so MP conversion and nimble fingers. This is so that the cooldown of our skills are lowered so that we can use the skills more often in case we don't end up killing the boss instantly. Then we also use skill expansion. I personally use this for the first skill for the drone, as my teammates are always running away from me in public matches, and it's good to have that extra bit of range so that I can stay next to them. You can obviously switch this out if you're playing with a group for some maybe like increased defense, and then for survivability we obviously have battle stamina and increased HP for the increased health, and then for the main damage we have passionate sponsor, shot focus, and conditional recharge. Passionate sponsor at the 10 stacks gives us 75% increased firearm attack. Shot focus gives us a flat 15% firearm attack increase. And then conditional recharge, this lowers our health whenever we use a skill, and this is so that we can gain the benefits of annihilation. Now in the document that I've written up, I've done the calculations for each buff, and I used the base firearm attack of Enduring Legacy. So the Enduring Legacy has the firearm attack base of 13,155, and that's what I've used here. And since Solarity's healing gives 34.5% here as well, buff increase. So for the calculation of this, we do base firearm attack, which can be any weapon's base firearm attack, and then we times it by 0.345, which is the decimal number of the percentage. So 13,155 times 0.345, and that gives us an increase of 4,539.38. Now, I can't demonstrate this since I don't have anyone to test it on, but that is what I got when I was testing it earlier. Now, Proliferating Allergy. This one is the damage increase received for enemies, and you'll see when I shoot the enemy, I get 28,927, and since Proliferating Allergy gives us a damage increase of 10%, and then if we inflict the enemy with Proliferating Allergy, we'll now deal 31,820. And that is the calculation that I have here. So you do your usual damage, which you'll have to test on certain enemies that you're dealing damage to, and you times that by 1.1, and that gives you your final damage. Now you should keep in mind that this is without firearm attack buffs. This is just Proliferating Allergy and Enduring Legacy, so you can increase this final damage even higher. Then I've done the crit damage calculations as well. So I usually crit for 223,000, and then with the allergy buff of 10%, I now crit for 245,000. And then Hyperreactive Healing Ground, this gives us a buff of 23%, and our base firearm is still 13,155. So we get the firearm attack increase of 23%. So we do base firearm attack times 0.23, that gives us an increase of 3,025. Also, whenever you have the buffs for firearm attack increase, if I go into my inventory and I hover over my weapon stats, the firearm attack is 28,927.84, and then whenever I use my fourth skill, then activate it, you'll see that it jumps up to 31,953.49, and that is the increase of 3,025.65. So we do 28,927.84, and then we add the 3,025.65, and that gives us the number that we just had. Now the Passionate Sponsor buff, our base is still 13,155. We gain a firearm attack increase of 7.5% per stack up to 10 stacks, so that's 75% at the full 10 stacks. So we do base firearm attack times 0.75, that gives us a total increase of 9,866.25. Then obviously the Annihilation set, we trigger this with conditional recharge, and this gives us a boost of 26%, but this also depends on how much health we have. So 13,155 times 0.26, that gives us an increase of 3,420.30. For the components you want to use the Annihilation set 4-piece. This is for the firearm attack increase of 26% whenever your health is 50% or lower. Now you don't actually need to use this, the 26% increase isn't really all that significant, although since we're maxing out the firearm attack damage, this is what I'm using. And if you want to max out your firearm attack damage, then this is also what you want to be using. However, this requires your health to be extremely low to gain the full benefits of the 26%. For your auxiliary power, you want MP recovery out of combat at max HP. For the sensor, you want max MP and MP recovery in combat. For the memory, you want defense and MP recovery modifier. And for the processor, you want shield recovery modifier and max shield. And then for the reactor, since we're focused on firearm attack damage, we don't really care about the skill power increase. For the weapon mounting, same goes for the skill power boost ratio, we don't care about that either, since we're not dealing damage with any skills. The only things we really want to focus on is the substats, and the main ones we want is skill cooldown and skill duration. This is just so we can have the buffs up longer and gain the skills back faster, meaning we'll deal more damage. Say for instance, if I don't have them on, you'll see the first skill goes to 9.6 seconds and 19.1, and then when I do have it on, the duration now goes to 20.1 and 10.1. So it's a little bit increase, but that little increase also lets you deal more damage. Also, if you primarily want to use your second skill for the increase of 10% damage to the enemies, when you inflict them with it, it will have this debuff for 10 seconds, and since our cooldown is only 3 seconds, we can actually keep this debuff up constantly. And as you can see, each time I use it, it will refresh the debuff. Also, if you want to play this build solo against certain bosses, you can actually switch out Passionate Sponsor and instead use Walk a Tightrope with conditional recharge. This deals 45% less firearm attack, but since you're not going to be buffing any allies, you won't be gaining the 75% from Passionate Sponsor, so you can switch out for Walk a Tightrope to deal the 30% when you're playing by yourself. Then the conditional recharge is obviously to lower your health, so you can get the 50% or lower to gain the 30%, along with your Annihilation set as well. The main weapons that I'll be using is Greg's and Enduring Legacy. I'm not going to go over them today in this video. I might do a separate video, but if you want the stats, this is the Greg's stats, and these are the modules that I'm using. This is Enduring Legacy, and these are the modules that I'm using with Enduring Legacy. Now I'm going to do 2 demonstrations, one on Devourer and one on Gluttony, just so you can get an idea of how it works and how to actually use your skills. If you found it very helpful, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, it will help the channel a lot. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.